This is something new that I'm trying to do here. I usually don't make like multiplayer levels, but I'm just going to describe and walk through my thought process through this 1v1 level that I've made on Fortnite. So here's a level on the left side, and on the right side is just the overview of it. These are the only two things that, if I can minimize the top, that'd be great. Yeah, cool. So this is just the overview of it. It's essentially symmetrical. So because it is a 1v1 map, I want to make it fair for both sides, and I thought the great best way to do that was just to make it symmetrical. And essentially, there are three levels. I'll go into the three levels on the right side a bit later. Essentially, there's I guess four. There's the ground level, the first level, second level, third level, and then there's a level in between, which are these things. This is kind of like how I describe this level 2.5. And essentially, I created the highest level, the third level in the middle, so that there is kind of a high risk, high reward of getting to the middle. So if you get to the middle by means of like jumping on these blocks or in the game, Fortnite has these impulse grenades that kind of just impulses you. You get to the top. The top, I meant for it to be a high risk, high reward kind of thing, because it is in the middle. It's highly contested, but it has really good vantage points from around the map. So essentially, how I'll draw this later. Why the high ground of this map is really important, but because it is in the middle, it has a lot of like areas that can see the middle, but the middle can't see it really. But actually, I just show you right now. Let me pause this. How to explain? Uh, Okay, so to explain like why the middle part is really important to my map, I can essentially draw the middle part here and then have, let's say, one player on top of it, and then another player at the at like let's say they're at base level 0, so they're at the floor. So essentially, the player on top can control the vision of the player on the bottom. So right now, the player on top can't see the player on the bottom. But let's say the player moves a little bit to the right. So now the player on top can have vision on the player right here, player on bottom. It controls or has two like advantages. You have advantage A where the player on top has the upper hand because they can control when they want to shoot. So let's say they unload their whole entire magazine on the player on bottom. Now they're going to retreat back here and reload and then get away from line sight of vision from the player on bottom, right? In addition, player on top has a lower field of, or the player on bottom, sorry, has a lower field of view as opposed to player on top, which has a higher field of view. You can see player on bottom. Let's just kind of make a little field of view triangle. They only have this little this area where they can really catch the player off guard, I guess. And that's a small angle that the player on top can control, as opposed to maybe the player on top who has a bit more of a field of view, still blocking by this, but a bit higher field of view of the player on bottom, so he can see essentially where the player on bottom moves, and he has like more than just a head to look at. So if you're on player on bottom, you have a head to look at, a lower hit percentage or a lower hit area, but player on top has a higher hit area. So essentially, that's the whole entire high risk, high reward play of or concept of the middle ground. But then, of course, you have because it is the middle, it's it encourages both players to maybe try to get on top, and maybe the player who's a bit better will get control of the top and force the other one to go like down, which is also why I created like natural cover. So maybe this is layer 1 or 2. I created natural cover because it doesn't force the player to actually get the cover on top. So let's say that you opt out to not get the level on top. Let's say you don't want to go up there. You still have cover on the bottom, so you're not handicapped if you don't have the high ground. In this scenario, and of course, this is on a 3D plane. I'm drawing on a 2D plane. But in this scenario, you can move left and right of the box to either to hide from the player on top or to get a line of view on the player on top. So even if the player on bottom doesn't have like the high ground advantage, they still have the advantage of appearing or disappearing behind natural cover. So they kind of have the same like control as the player on top, but the player on top does have a bit more advantage because they're able to see, they're able to see maybe above the box, or they're able to see when the player is gonna move left or right, and they just have like a wider view of the whole entire map. Okay, and this is essentially the overview of the map. So on the bottom, you have the ground floor. I'll call that ground floor 0. You have 2 or 1, 2, and 3, and then I guess these are 2.5. So I made it in this way. So there's four paths really to get to the middle. There's actually six, and then there's a few more. But you can't see here, but these are ramps. Um, here and, oh sorry, here and here. These are ramps. So essentially, this is giving the player the idea to use their impulse grenades to get from here to the middle to get that high ground or to contest that high ground. But again, remember, like I said before, there are these little barriers. So let's say you have a person right here and a person on the high ground. Person on the high ground does not have line of sight of the player right here until that player right here, kind of that player right here moves like either right here or right here. Yeah. So in addition, these boxes are also placed in a way to encourage gunfight. There's line of sight here, line of sight here, line of sight here. There's a hole in here, so there's line of sight from here to here. Again, same line of sight here, line of sight here. Underneath here is hollow, so there's line of sight from here to here, line of sight here to here. Again, line of sight from here to here, line of sight here. So it's a very open map. So that's only at the base level. So if you're at base level 0, you essentially have line of sight everywhere. I made sure that I didn't place a box next to these corners, right? Because if we place a box next to these corners, then we're kind of disrupting one of the line of sights, and we're disrupting line of sight from left to right, disrupting line of sight from diagonally. So made it a part of the map to not add that, right? We give line of sight here as well, here, 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 here. So essentially, it's a very open map, and that's kind of the way I want it to be. What else? What else? What else? What else? Yeah, so I also made it so that the walls aren't touching any of the boxes. In my first iteration of the map, I actually had a box here. This wall was kind of positioned like this, but I started to realize after playtesting it that this eliminated one line of sight, and it also made the map feel not so flowy. So I don't know, it just feels weird to have a wall on top of another wall. It feels like a player can just kind of hide here and have zero blind spots, which feels really weird because they have a wall right here or here, or a player can hide in their own side right here. So instead, I made a wall here. So let's say a player does hide here. I mean, that's like it's a good place to hide, I guess, if you wanna play it like that. But you only have one wall protecting you as opposed to like 50% of field of view being, or 50% of your body being like, or sides being protected, I guess. Right? You only have one. But yeah, it just having no walls on the side increases the map's um, like openness, I guess. So it encourages more fighting. Yeah, and of course verticality. That's why I added the different 0, base, 1, 2, 3. I added a lot of verticality to the map so that it encourages players to take the 3 position. But they could also fight on the 2 and 1, I guess. But the 3 position is essentially where you want to be. So most players will either spend most of their time on ground level 0 or level 3. I think the verticality adds more like flow to the map, and it adds more like natural cover, if that makes sense. So Like I showed before, number three does have an insane amount of natural cover, being able to like back up and then go to the edge to peek at other players and then back up and whatnot. So a lot of verticality adds a lot more cover without having a lot of obstacles, if that makes sense. So this is a very open map, but there's still a lot of cover because if you are on one of these vertical areas, you are able to control like the cover that you have. So same with like one or two. Let's say you're a little dot right here. Same concept applies. You can essentially go to the side to peek over to look at a player maybe over here, and then you can take cover by just backing up, right? You can go on the third level, peek at people at enemy spawn, and then go back, and then you have cover. So that's essentially natural cover due to verticality. Yeah, that's my first map. A bit longer of a video than I wanted to be, but I hope I explained everything.